Okay, so today is March 5th, 2024. Uh, we are with Gaylon and Mickie Thompson of the Miami Ward, longtime residents of the Globe Stake. Um, we're visiting with them about their experiences in the stake and in the church. I'm wondering, Brother Thompson, I wonder if you'd be willing to start by giving us a little bit of your background, because you weren't a member of the church growing up. If you can just tell us a little bit about your background
Okay.
and maybe how you first got connected with the church.
Okay. Well, I really didn't have much to do with the church until after I was married. I had some when I was dating Mickie because her mom was very influential in my life, not only when I was dating Mickie, but even after we were married. But I recall her spirit and her attitude. She was a beautiful woman in every respect. And she took me to the Salt Lake Visitor Center, and I had always been told often in my life by many that didn't have a clue what the church stood for or meant, that we didn't believe in Jesus Christ, that we worshiped Joseph Smith. And then she took me to the visitor center, and on the second floor of the visitor center there was that large statue of Christ on the second floor. And as I walked up there, it was just majestic. It just touched me when I seen it, and I thought, what I've learned about the church has been so wrong for so long. This is not true. And so then we were married, and we came down here, and Mickie was involved, and I still wasn't a member of the church. Mickie was involved with I believe it was the stake. I don't know whether it was stake or the ward, but you can tell.
Ward, young women's.
Anyway, she had to go to a meeting back in the St. Joseph stake when we were meeting in Thatcher. We hadn't been a stake yet, and so we only had one car, and I had to take her to the church, and I really regretted doing that because I know they were always asking me to, come to church and things very kindly, but I just didn't ever want to do that. And I backed my car into the curb for a quick getaway, and that's not a joke. I really did that, and rolled up my window so nobody could talk to me, and was just happily sitting there by myself waiting for Mickie to leave. And there was a tap on the window. Well, when somebody knocks on the window, you can't just not roll the window down. So I rolled the window down, and it was Benny Joe Cecil. And he asked me if I was married to Mickie, and I said yes. And he said, "Well, it's nice to meet you." And he, introduced himself. And then right behind him, there were two missionaries, Elder Hendricks and Elder Beckstead. And he quickly introduced them to me, and they asked if they could come by. And out of duty and obligation more than out of spirit, I said yeah. And they came over, and they became my friends. Elder Hendricks and Elder Beckstead did, and we would go play basketball on their P days. I think then it was Saturdays in the morning. And then Elder Beckstead was transferred the day before I was going to be baptized. And an elder named maybe not the day before, I think it was 3 or 4 days before. And a new missionary came named Elder Frost. He was quite a bit different than Elder Beckstead. He was shy and quiet. And anyway, they baptized and confirmed me, and that was the beginnings of my church. And I never thought ever in my life that I would sit 2 hours in a church meeting or 3 hours in a church meeting. And nowadays, some days I so enjoy the gospel. And some of my callings that I've had, I spend all day long in the church building, and don't regret it for a bit.
So let's go back a little bit. You mentioned going to Temple Square in Salt Lake. Where were you living at the time?
Little town called Eureka, Utah. That's where Mickie was from. My dad was working in the mines up there, and I went up there from Arizona for the summer to be with him, and that's how I got from Arizona to Eureka, is because my dad's employment. And I just stayed up there and went my senior year of high school up there because, of course, I liked the kids up there, one of them especially. That was Mickie. And that's pretty much how, and the reason we were at Temple Square was I think it was the Christmas lights, and Mickey's family were going, and so they invited me to go along, and I went, and it was a beautiful experience.
When you were in that last year of high school up in Eureka, Utah, did you go to any church functions, or did you try to avoid those? What was that like?
Tried to avoid anything that had to do with church, so no, I didn't do a thing with the church up there.
Was it any church, or was it particular Church
No,
of Jesus Christ?
I never went to any church. Wasn't raised pretty much in any church. Never did really go to any church. Mickey's mom did invite me to go to a state conference once, and she was my partner, so I went and listened to one of the general authorities, I think, speak, but I had no clue what that meant. Quite a pleasant meeting, and I enjoyed the meeting, but only because I was respectful for Mickey's mom, because she was so kind and respectful to me.
So it was Benny Joe Cecil that tapped on your window.
He's the one that got the ball rolling with the missionaries. He's the one that opened his mouth and said, "Hey, who are you? And here's these missionaries." And that's.
Do you recall what calling he had at the time?
He had been released as a bishop, and it was not the bishop at the time. Philip Gordon was the bishop, but I think he was in the young men's presidency as a priest quorum advisor.
Wasn't he the state president?
Not at that time.
Of course, eventually he became the first stake president of the Globe Stake.
We weren't a stake
Oh,
then.
that's right, we weren't a state.
We weren't a stake then, but he eventually became a counselor in the St. Joseph stake and traveled back and forth. Wonderful man.
Okay, great. So the two of you met then in high school?
Yes.
So, Sister Thompson, you grew up in Utah,
Uh-huh.
Eureka, Utah.
I did.
You got married, and then you came to Miami, Arizona. What was that like?
It was awful. I thought I'd come to the worst place on earth, the lowest kingdom that God has, and there was sulfur smoke all over, and it was hot, but it didn't take me very long to realize that there were so many good people here. And I always prayed for a long time, 3 or 4 or 5 years, that we would go to Utah, we'd go back to Utah, But eventually the Lord let me know we're supposed to be here. This is where He wants us. And I'm very happy here. I wouldn't move away from here unless we just absolutely had to. But I had a wonderful life in Utah, but I've got a wonderful life here too.
We did leave once. Tell them about that.
Well, Gaylon had to work up north, and I cried when we had to go up there, but we would come home on weekends. But
What does up north mean?
what was it?
I worked at the Joseph City Power Plant up there. We lived in a little town up there, Taylor, and
Taylor, Arizona. And there were nice people there too, but Globe by that time was my home. Globe Miami was my home, and I didn't want to be in Taylor.
she said to me one day as we were leaving to go back up there, she said, "This place is one of the ugliest places I've ever
Yes.
been." She says, "But I've never met nicer people." Because I asked her why she was crying. We'd hit the turn to go up to, in Globe, we'd turn to go towards Shoal, and she'd start crying. And I'd say, "What's wrong with you?" And the first couple of times she says, "This is the ugliest town I've ever lived in." She says, "But it's got the nicest people that I know."
Now, up in Utah, Eureka, Utah probably had to have been 90% members of the church. Miami obviously wasn't like that.
No.
What was that? Were you able to react to that, coming to a place where the church wasn't the majority?
Well, in Eureka, as Juab County, and when I was in high school, we weren't mostly LDS. We had Catholic, Methodist, and LDS, and I had friends of different religions, but a lot of the girls would just come to Young Women's at night because it was a social activity, because it's a very small town, nothing a lot to do. But when I came here, I had been taught, I guess, by my mom, I just didn't miss a beat. We came here and I just got up on Sundays and went to church by myself. I just knew that was what you were supposed to do. And it wasn't and then they gave me the calling for young women's, and I think it was Bishop Gordon that was the bishop. Philip Gordon was the bishop, and Virgil Alexander was there, and I just met different people that are still my friends today. Nelda Gordon was one. She was very nice to me. Linda Wheeler, Diana Hincha, and I just went. That's what you were supposed to do. I just went.
So, when you moved down here, how long did it take before Brother Thompson had President Cecil tap on the windshield?
Not very long.
No, it wasn't too long at all.
Less than a year.
Yeah, because I joined the church less than a year
Yes.
after we were married. We were married in March, and I was baptized in August. And so that's 7 months or whatever it was. And so that's about how long it was before I joined the church.
Now, how old were you when you joined the church?
20.
20. Before we started this interview, you had mentioned being called as an elders quorum president at age 23. So you were a convert at age 20, and by age 23, you were called to be the elders quorum president. What was that like?
I believe it or not, the 3 years I've been trained pretty well. My first calling was a secretary to the young men's, and didn't do that very long, and probably didn't do that very well. And then I was made a teacher's quorum advisor, and learned a little bit from the young men about the church. And then there was a seminary teacher that came here named Ted DeMille. And Ted DeMille was the elders quorum president, and Stan Schellenberger, Mark Schellenberger's brother, was also here, and he was one counselor, and then I was the other counselor. And so I served with them in the presidency, and after about a year, I think, or whatever it was, Brother DeMille transferred out, and I was called to be the elders quorum president. I think Brother Schellenberger, about that same time, left or was leaving, and I was called to be the elders quorum president, and so that's how I got to be an elders quorum president. I've gone full circle. I was an elders quorum president, I think it was around 23 or 24, and here I am now, 72 years old, and I'm an elders quorum president again, 71 years old.
What was it like to be an elders quorum president after 3 years in the church? How did you feel about that? Were you scared? Was it?
I've never really had a calling anywhere in the church at any time, including today, where church callings haven't scared me to the point that I try to work at it and try to do what's right. But one of the impressive things about being an elders quorum president, it all has blessings. If you look, every calling you ever have has tremendous blessings if you just reflect on it a little bit. And a week after Brother DeMille was released and I was called to be the elders quorum president, they had a solemn assembly in West Phoenix, and I was the only ones invited were elders quorum presidents, and I believe bishoprics at the time, and of course stake officials. So I went down to a solemn assembly, and I got to see in one place at one time 10, I believe there were a few missing. I think 10 of the apostles of the church were there then, and 2 of the presidency of the church, and President Kimball was the prophet, and Eldon Tanner was a counselor, and Marion G. Romney was a counselor, and I think Bruce R. McConkie wasn't there, and I think, I'm not sure, but I don't think Eldon Tanner was there either, so I can't remember. But what an event that was, what a fascinating, and I look back on that as one of the huge blessings of my life to have been in a solemn assembly in just a chapel of the stake center with all of the general authorities of the church almost.
You had good counselors, Eddie Gibson.
Yeah, I had Eddie Gibson and
Can't remember who
well,
else.
Buck Hassel, he was
Oh,
the
yes.
secretary, and I don't recall who my other counselor was at this point in time, but they were seasoned veterans in the church, and taught me well. I was their leader, and they taught me how to be one, and I appreciated that.
Well, you've held a number of other callings, and particularly you were a bishop in Miami
It
as
was,
well.
Virgil Alexander was the bishop of the Miami First Ward, and they split the ward, and Carl Eager was the first bishop of the Miami Second Ward, and I served with him as a counselor for a time, and when he was released, I was called to be the bishop of the Miami Second Ward, and when I was released from that, I was released as a bishop, and I think they had one, I can't remember whether they reconsolidated the wards after I was released, but I think Brother Redford, who became the stake patriarch, I believe he was the bishop after I was.
Now, the stake was created in 1974, but for a long time the stake, we didn't have a stake center.
We didn't.
And do you have any memories, either one of you, about the creation of the stake and what it was like no longer going to Thatcher for stake meetings?
It was a celebration. People were excited. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing, and there were a lot of fundraising events, and a lot of people worked very hard to get the building finished and completed. And Dale Taylor and his family, that's the first time they came here, and he was in charge of the stake center from the church. Didn't he work for the church? Dale Taylor worked for the church.
He worked for Burton Construction, and Burton Construction, I think, was the company that built the stake center.
And he oversaw it.
He was the superintendent of the stake center build at the time, working for Burton.
It was a wonderful time, and not to have to go to Safford anymore.
Let me ask you a couple of questions on that, Sister Thompson. Do you have any good memories of going to Safford or Thatcher? And do anything stand out?
Yes, we would have to go, I think it was primary, maybe Relief Society, but we would have to go to leadership meetings down there. And, 4 or 5 ladies in the car, just being girls, laughing and visiting, and always a stop at the, what is the Dairy Queen down there? Tasty Freeze. Always stop at Tasty Freeze.
The one there
in Pima.
Yeah, the one in Pima.
They're good. They were very good times. Very memorable. Yeah.
So, what you mentioned fundraisers for the stake center. Any particular fundraising activity stand out for you, Sister Thompson? Or?
Jeez, I can't. Can you? Bake sales?
That's bake sales. I think they made pizzas. They had bake sales.
Oh, we did do pizzas. Brother Tom we did pizzas. We sold them. We'd go down on Saturday morning, and the crusts were already made, and then we would take orders, and we'd put the pepperonis and the sauce and the mushrooms, and then we would deliver them or they would come get them.
They delivered them to wherever
they needed
whoever
to
ordered
be.
them. The young men and young women would deliver them.
We had a lot of. We'd be there at 8 o'clock in the morning making those pizzas. That was fun.
And of course, in those times, which are different from today, the local units had to provide a certain percentage of the funds for the buildings.
It was an allocated percentage to each ward, and the stake had an allocation, so.
Now, Brother Thompson, before we started the interview, you were telling me a story about fundraising that involved Brother Griffith from
good.
Kearney. Do you want to share that story with
Well,
us?
I will if I don't get myself in trouble. We had a priesthood leadership meeting in the multi-purpose room in the Miami ward because it was the acting stake center at the time, and we were already a stake. We just didn't have a building, and as I recall, anyway, President Taylor, who I loved, and he was such a energetic individual and was just always excited and made you excited. And he stood at the front of the meeting as it began, and he reported on the fundraising activities, and he said the fundraising is going phenomenally, he said, or used words like that, and I recall him saying the older sisters in the ward are even taking their money that they have in the bank to bury them with and have their funerals with, and they are dedicating that to the building of the stake center. And Brother Griffith, having been a mortician at the time and owned a funeral home, or his family did in Kearney, he stood up and said, "Now that's going too far." And everybody got a chuckle out of it. I can remember that moment.
Do you have any particular memories of the building of the stake center? Anything else stand out?
Just how beautiful it was when it was built and dedicated, and I mean, it was just an awesome looking building and so big compared to what we've been used to. And just the gymnasium alone, I liked basketball at that time, just looking at the beautiful gymnasium that was there, and there was no expense spared. And I'd even heard comments in the St. Joseph stake about the stone wall behind the pulpit. And I wasn't even here. I was at a meeting down in Thatcher, a funeral or something, and one of the guys that I knew there came up to me and said, "Yeah, you guys are the ones that have that beautiful flagstone wall behind your pulpit." And I said, "Yeah, that's it." So yeah, it was not only recognized, it was a beautiful and a great blessing to us, but others also realized what a nice building we were blessed with.
Now, in one of your callings, Brother Thompson, you were asked to go to the Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico.
Yes.
For some training. Can you tell us about that and how that happened, how you were asked, what type of effect it had on you?
Well, let me just start that by asking Mickie to tell you how she felt about it.
They slept in tents with wooden floors, and I really wasn't very excited about going. They asked us to go with Jim and Phyllis Watts, and they had maybe 4 cabins with its private little bathroom. And Phyllis and I were standing with President Watts and Gaylon. They were signing out those tents, who was going to sleep in this tent, no bathroom, and I just didn't want to. I had 3 little tiny kids. The youngest was 3, and they assigned Phyllis and Jim Watts a cabin, and Gaylon and I got a cabin. There was the nicest, oldest woman there, and Phyllis and I asked her, how does she determine who sleeps in the cabin? She said she prayed about it. She prays about it a lot, and our names just came up, and with my 3 little ones, and Phyllis had a little son, and it worked out perfect, and I was so thankful to go. It was a wonderful, spiritual, beautiful place to be.
Yeah, picking up from there, it was raining when we got there. And there were rows and rows and rows of tents with wooden platforms for floors, and Mickie had tremendous concerns about that, But I'll back up a little bit. Before we even went, we committed, President Flake was the stake president at the time, and he had certain individuals in the stake, based on calling, that he wanted to receive that training. However, there wasn't a budget for that. So you had, and he told us well in advance, that you would be expected to go to Philmont Scout Ranch to take church leadership training about Boy Scouts of America. And he had told us, and it came right up until about a month before we had to go, and they posted a layoff notice at work. And that's back in the day when everything was based on seniority, and I'd only been counting for a few years, and so I was the number 2 guy to go out of the shop that I was working in, and they were taking 5. And so I went and had a discussion with President Flake, which had a lot of spiritual blessings in it, and I won't get into that because it'd take too long. But anyway, he just finally said, after I whined about it for a while, he just said, "I'm just telling you, the Lord wants you to go and be trained at Philmont. Be good for you, be good for your family. You need to do this."
He was very firm about it. He just said, your family is gonna go to Philmont and everything will be okay.
And he was as confident as anybody
He
I
was
ever heard
very
when he said that.
confident.
So I after that night, I came home, and Mickey was in bed. It was late evening at the 6th, and Mickey, I came home, and there was the way we communicated, they would stick notes on the door. And there was a note stuck on the door that asked me to call a man who was the department head at the company. And I never dealt with him directly about anything else. I was curious, and it was late night. And the note specifically said it doesn't matter what time you need to call him. And so I called him, and his name was John. And I can say his name's John Lorenzen was his name. And I said, "John," I said, "I found a note on my door that said I should call you. I apologize for calling so late." And he said, "I want to talk to you when you come in the morning about a job opportunity." And I said, "Okay." And when I went to work in the morning, he'd removed my name from the layoff list, and had told me that I needed to go see the manager of the department for an interview. And they changed my work from being an hourly employee to a salaried exempt employee, which means that I wasn't subject in that particular position to being laid off. And that was the first blessing right after I had my interview with President Flake. And to this day, I will always wonder whether, if I had said no to President Flake, whether that note would have been on the door. Anyway, when we got up there, it was raining, it was lousy, and I went inside to sign us in, and like Mickey said, the lady handed us a key. And I thought there was locks on the canvas. I didn't know. I said, "So do these tents have locks on them?" And she goes, "Oh no." She goes, "You guys have what you call it?
A little cabin.
It was more of a duplex. You guys are living in one of the duplexes." Mm-hmm. And then right after that, Mickey found out that the Watts were living in the duplexes right next to us. So all was well after that. And then Mickey was worried about being saddled with the kids all day long. Still, the emotion was there because she didn't know what she was going to do. She thought she was going to have to take care of kids. It was quite the opposite. She's the one that had nothing to do all day long. The kids went to classes, and I was in class, so Mickey had the whole day by herself to walk around the beautiful place.
They had activities for us. They did.
So that was all the blessings, and even on the way back, our car broke down, and you could expect that to be a not fun thing, and it was hot. Lost the fuel pump right in a little town just outside of Grants, New Mexico. And I was trying to work on the car, and I realized it was a fuel pump, and the Watts were coming up behind us, but they hadn't come along yet. And was trying to get the fuel pump off, and this car kept driving around and around and around. And it was an old gray station wagon, and it had a really big, unsavory looking guy in there. And finally, as he went about the third time around the block, he pulled right straight into the front of my car with his car. And he was even more intimidating when he got out, because he was huge man. And he said, "Are you having trouble?" And I said, "I think I lost a fuel pump." He said, "Well, turn it over." And I didn't. He confirmed that I'd lost the fuel pump. And what a beautiful experience. He was a retired New York City policeman that had been shot in the line of duty and had come out west to try to heal. And I learned from him, I'm not the judge, appearances are people. Mickey was scared. He put us in that old station wagon of his, and I told Mickey, "I'll be back, I'm going to get a fuel pump." She goes, "Oh no, we're all going together." And so we all piled into his station wagon, kids and all, and we went back to Grant's, and he got me the best deal on the fuel pump that he could. And then we come back and he helped me put the fuel pump on, and then just about the time we got the fuel pump on, Jim and Phyllis Watts came along, and we went to his home, and it was an unfinished garage with a sink in it.
Very humble.
And a bed. And he let us use his sink to wash up and clean ourselves up, and then
He got us water.
gave us something to drink. And at the end of it all, he said, "If you'd like to stick around, we're having a revival this evening at my church, and I'd like you to come and go with me." Well, of course, traveling, and I said, "No, we can't do that." But I really appreciated his offer. And I never once talked to him about the church. He helped me fix my car and talked to me about his church. So I learned about opening your mouth. I learned about charity. I learned about patience. I learned about judging, all from that moment. So.
Well, thank you. One of the things that I think you led for the stake happened a number of years ago when the stake actually sponsored a Habitat for Humanity home. Can you tell us about that, how that went, and
I can. You get to do all of the next talking. President Wolf was the stake president at the time, and he had agreed that we would take on a Habitat house that would be funded by the mining company at the time. I don't recall which mining company it was, whether it was Cypress or I think it was Cypress. But anyway, the mining company put up money so that the house could be built, and then President Wolf, I think, worked through Habitat, and we committed to provide the labor to build a house. And what a wonderful experience. It was a challenge to build because it's all volunteers, and you're dependent on people to show up and help. And boy, did the state come through on that one. Kearney, were the furthest ward away, and boy, they came through like troopers with, what's the bishop's name? Bishop Colby and Sister Colby. They came and they led and they participated and they worked and they brought a lot of people. And I can remember, I don't want to say too many names because I don't want to leave anybody out, but anyway, we finished the house and they had a dedicatory ceremony, and I think President Wolf was there as a representative of the church, and the general manager of the mining company was there and cut the ribbon. And it was for the Odom family. She was a school teacher at Miami High School, and she had two daughters, I think.
Two little ones. Weren't they pretty little?
Yeah. Anyway, it's the house. If you go up to Christina Apartments, there's it's straight south of the Christina Apartments, right up on the hill behind the Christina Apartments. There's a little house there, and that's the one that the church built with Habitat for Humanity.
as I recall, wasn't it on what used to be the old tennis courts for the Miami High School?
They removed the tennis courts and then put the house there.
Okay. I wanted to ask about stake athletics. So I know that's something that you participated a lot in. I know when I moved into the stake and would come to stake basketball and things like that, you were always there, and I remember you had a pretty decent 3-point shot. Tell us a little bit about that, how you felt it worked, what it was like.
It was fun. I love basketball, and I like to play a lot of basketball. And when the Stake Center was built, we had a lot of fun playing basketball over there. And that back then we had men's teams and the youth had youth teams. And so it's quite a bit of fun to go over there and play. I recall you elbowing me a time or two, and shooting some pretty good 3-pointers yourself. But it was quite a strengthening kind of a thing. I think it brought us together, and I think when you do those kinds of things and activities, although they're not sponsored by the church anymore, openly like they used to be, that they still, I think, are fun to do when you can get people together and do those kinds of activities. I think that strengthens the camaraderie between wards and in the state. But I had a good time and appreciated it. I recall, and it was in the newspaper, Miami wards had to come. We were asked by the Chamber of Commerce in Globe, I think, to field a team and play in the tournament, the city tournament that they had over in Globe. So we did, and we were fortunate because we had a man. I think, as I recall, his name was Bruce Sauer, and he was about 6'10". Played a little college basketball, and so we couldn't field a whole team that's back when we had 2 wards. So we just combined wards and made one team and went over and played in that tournament. And without giving it much thought, it was sponsored by Budweiser, the Budweiser distributor in Globe. And we won the tournament. And right after we won the tournament, I think it was about a quarter-page or half-page ad in the Silver Belt newspaper. It had Miami Ward wins Budweiser tournament, and it had a picture of the team, which now is kind of laughable. But and I don't think any of us that played in that tournament thought anything about who the sponsor was. We just wanted to play basketball. But those are the kind of experiences I had. And softball is another thing. We used to battle it out playing softball, and we won the region here one year and went all the way up to Prescott and played teams out of Nevada and teams out of southern Utah.
Well, you played up in Safford and Thatcher too,
well,
a lot, didn't you?
That's the regional tournament. We had
Yeah.
to go down there and play. If you got through the regional tournament, then you got to go through the area tournament, and we got to go to Prescott and stay in Prescott for, I think we were up there 4 days and played softball up there. We won the consolation bracket, but we got knocked out of the championship. But yeah, good memories from sports.
Well, I'd like to ask both of you a couple things. First, just sort of a general, as we've been talking, are there any particular stories or things, events that you'd like to elaborate on? And I'd also like you to if you're willing, to bear your testimonies. Sister Thompson, have you thought of anything that we've left out that you think we should discuss?
No, I believe with all my heart that this is a special area. We had, before he was the counselor in the first presidency, Brother Eyring came quite a few years ago and spoke to us as a stake. And he did say that this was a blessed area, and that one day he said in vague terms that it would become a refuge, but he didn't know much more than that. And I know that this is a special place, and I know that our stake and the people that live within our stake boundaries and the leadership that we have had and continue to have today, it's a blessing to live in this area and to have seen it grow and to have our new stake center. And it's been a good experience. I'm thankful for it.
You having said that caused me to remember Hartman Rector Jr. was a member of the Quorum of the 70, and he spoke at our state conference one time. And he was an interesting fellow and was funny, and I liked that about him. But I remember him standing at the pulpit one time and saying, I think he was speaking about the second coming, At least that was what he was talking about at the time. And he said, no one knows, as the scriptures indicate, no one knows about the second coming, the time or etc. And then he stopped for a minute and he said, Bruce thinks he knows, but he won't tell anybody. And he was talking about Bruce R. McConkie, who was a great scriptorian. And in my mind, he's one of my favorite people to learn from. But anyway, he said that, and I thought, well, that's something to be said of. But he was a great speaker. I know that this is a place I'm supposed to be, and it's a place I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing for now. Anyway, you never know when things change, but for now, I have a great deal of love and admiration for our stake leaders at the present time. Love President Pollock. He's a great man, and counselors are great men as well. Brother Chambers and President Chambers, President Peary. I believe the Lord knows what he's doing based on everything that I've ever seen. I can't honestly say that I've ever seen anyone called to a position that they haven't. At least if it was questioning in the beginning, it's never been questioned at the end. And so I know that we're being led by divine leadership, not only as a prophet and head of the church, but in our stake and in our wards as well. Love our current Bishop Perry, Tyler Perry. He's a wonderful man, and young, smart, and bright, articulate. Love him. And I have a testimony that the gospel's true. I don't have in as much as I fail and have to repent, I know that it's me and not the gospel. The gospel is perfect. And just bear you that witness in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Very good.
I do have a testimony of this gospel. My greatest treasure is my membership in this church and my testimony and Gaylon's membership and testimony, and a lot of my family. My family goes back many generations that have come across the plains, and we have some. I read once where it said just recently where you should be, don't break the chain of your family, whether you inherited the gospel and it comes through a long line of family members, or more like in Gaylon's case where he started for our family, more of his family being like the first or second or third link in his chain for his family. And so we do all have our heritage and our beginnings, and I believe with all my heart that Jesus is the Christ, and I'm so thankful for all that it blesses me with. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you to both of you for taking the time to share these stories with us. Thank you for being the great examples that you are. And with that will conclude our interview for today. Again, thank you very much.